we're going to discuss the options included with InDesign CS6 that allow us to pre-flight or quality check our InDesign document while we're actually creating it. Those functions are actually hidden right underneath here in the live pre-flighting panel that we have included within InDesign. You'll notice that it has this little green light that sits over here to the bottom. That means that pre-flight is enabled. As it says, no errors are detected, and that we can double click to open the pre-flight panel. Now I'm going to show you another way that we can get to that. I'm going to go to this downward pointing triangle just to the right of our pre-flight light, and I'm going to open up the flyaway menu that goes for it. Now by default, InDesign CS6 is set to pre-flight whichever document that you're working on, and also to enable pre-flighting for all documents that are available and open within the InDesign CS6 application. Above that we have two options. One of them is to open the pre-flight panel, and what this does is it allows us to do a pre-flighting check and to set a specific profile that we'd be working with. In our case, we're using the default basic or working profile. There's also an optional profile for digital publishing that we'll talk about later in this InDesign CS6 course. But for right now, we're going to work with the basic working profile, and we can see that it shows no errors are available. We get that confirmation by this little green light. If there were errors or problems, that would actually be red here in the panel, as well as right down here where we're looking in the bottom of our InDesign document window. I'm going to set this aside just a little bit. We'll come back to it a little later. But we're also going to set a custom profile. And to build that, you go to this Define Profiles menu command in the flyaway menu. And what we're going to do is we're going to design a brand new custom profile. I'm first going to click this new pre-flight profile button, and we're going to name this new pre-flight profile TT Commercial Color Printing, since that'll be the basic profile that we're going to be setting up to pre-flight or quality test our InDesign card flyer today. Now here we can enter a new description. Right now it says this is a copy of the default profile with default rule settings. We're going to say that this profile is for our class color commercial printing profile. It's just a short description that lets us see when we open up this pre-flight profile what we intend it to be. Now beneath this we have a series of options that we can set. For example, links. By default, InDesign CS6 is designed to let us know if there are any missing links, which means placed documents or graphics that cannot be found by the computer, or links that have been modified or changed since we've originally placed those in our InDesign CS6 documents. Also, we have an option to let us know if any URL links, we can put hyperlinks into our InDesign documents, are inaccessible or not able to be brought up by a typical web browser. For some reason, the site may be down or there might be some conflict with that. Finally, we have what are known as OpenPress Interface or OPI links. We want to check on that because we want to make sure that we're working with high resolution graphics for everything that we've got placed. The second area where we can load settings into this is underneath color, and we have a number of options that are set here for what we can do with color settings. For example, we can say if there's any transparency blending space required, we can set that to say that it should be in CMYK color, which is what we would normally use for commercial printing, or it could be in RGB terms, which would be something we'd use for interactive publications, those digital publishing outputs that we were talking about before, or for specific workflows. We're going to set this for CMYK. Beneath this, we want to say that we want to allow cyan, magenta, or yellow plates to allow for process printing, the photographic images that we have loaded in this. So we won't be checking this option. But beneath it, where we have color spaces in modes that are not allowed, we want to specify what type of color that we'll allow in this document. We don't want to include RGB color separations because they won't work correctly unless you have a specific workflow for commercial printing. So I'm going to check that option to not be allowed. The same with lab color, which is a clinical definition or technical definition for color, and also for spot color. Spot color would be if I wanted to print green on this business card. I would actually load green ink into the printing press and print that color directly, as opposed to using process color, which is normally what's used for photographic images like we have in our card flyer, that actually allows us to make that green out of components of cyan, which is a robin's egg blue, a bright lemon yellow, and then possibly some small percentages of other color builds, the magenta, a bright pink, or key color black. In this case, we will be working with process color. We will not be working with spot color, so we'll ask this to alert us if we have any problems working with that. We have options for what we could say for spot color setup, but again, we're not going to allow any of those in this document, so we don't need to check that option. There are some color options that we do want to say. We don't want overprinting applied to white or paper color. We don't want any registration color applied within the document. If we use registration colors, it would be things like registration marks or crop marks that actually print on every color plate of the document. That's great outside of our bleed area, but inside of it, we don't want any of those elements to come in. So we'll check that option to let us know if there are any problems along that way. Beneath that, we have the Images and Objects option. We're going to go to that next. We can specify, for example, image resolution. We can set a minimum resolution, which in this case, we're going to bring that down just a little bit. We'll say 200 pixels per inch. And we'll do the same for grayscale images. And we can also say for 1-bit or monochrome images that we could allow for a minimum resolution of 1200 pixels per inch. We want to check this non-proportional scaling of placed objects. What this will do is it'll let us know if we've artificially distorted, made a graphic, for example, wider than we have made it tall in a percentage basis. We want it to alert us if we have any of those distortions loaded in. We're going to say that we want it to let us know whether we're using transparency with any of our graphics. We're not going to bother with the image ICC profile section, although we can adjust this for rendering intents for pixel graphics and vector graphics that have been brought into the document. Interactive elements. We'll work with this detail when we set up pre-flight profiles for digital publications later in our InDesign CS6 course. Bleed and trim hazards, and then any hidden page items. We'll leave those open for right now. Let's go next to the text section. And by default, InDesign CS6 is set to let us know if we have overset text. So for example, more characters than are allowed within the text frames that we have in our document, and whether there are any fonts missing in that document. We can also set a number of things like non-proportional type scaling if we distorted type the same way we were talking about distorting graphics earlier. Any conditional text or unresolved caption variables. Setting text to span columns or any track changes that haven't been incorporated in the document. We can live with the default settings we have right here. Let's go to the last section, the document itself. And what we could do is we could set specific rules for page size orientation, although we don't have to do that. We know the size of what we're working with right here. The number of pages required, whether blank pages can be incorporated or not. Bleed and slug setup. We have set that up in our document, so we're going to check this and open this option to say that the bleed must be a minimum of, as we've got set by default, 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And then we also have the option, depending on the type of document we're working with, that all pages must be the same size and orientation. Now, we're going to go through these settings one more time just to make sure that everybody's working with the same frame of reference. When we go to links, we want to make sure all three of these options are checked. When we go to color, we want to say the transparency blending space required should be CMYK. We also want to say color spaces modes that are not allowed for our color printing are RGB, lab color, and spot color. As we get down to overprinting, we don't want any overprinting applied to white or paper color elements or registration colors applied for graphic elements within our InDesign document. For images and objects, we set a minimum resolution of 200 pixels per inch for color and grayscale images, and for monochrome or 1-bit images, we've set a minimum resolution of 1200 pixels per inch. We've said that we don't want to allow any non-proportional scaling of placed objects. We want InDesign to alert us if we have those problems. And we have set it to let us know if transparency is used anywhere within our InDesign document. As we get down to text, we want the overset text, font missing, and unresolved caption variables checked. We don't need to do any other options for the rest of this. And then for the document, we want to say that we'll allow a bleed and slug setup and that the bleed size must be a minimum of 1/8 of an inch all the way around. If you have the same settings I have, we're going to say OK. And we've built our custom profile that we're going to use for our InDesign document, but we haven't applied it yet. To do that in the pre-flight window, what we want to do is change our profile from our basic working to the new one that we've created, the TT Commercial Color Printing Pre-Flight Profile. And when I select that, it'll check the document, and it'll let us know that we have some problems in that document with images and objects, as well as colors set in the document. In the next unit of our InDesign CS6 course, we'll go through what it takes to actually fix the problems that we've set inside of here.